A single woman helped fix a stranger's car on the way to her blind date, unaware he was the billionaire who she would never forget. She thought she was just being kind, stopping on a quiet road to help a man whose engine had died. She didn't know that one small moment, one greasy handprint on a dress, would wreck her blind date and turn her entire life upside down. Because that quiet stranger, he wasn't just stranded, he was watching her, studying her, trying to understand why someone with nothing to gain would help a man like him. And days later, when her struggling business was about to shut down for good, a mysterious offer appeared, signed by a silent partner who refused to show his face. But behind the money, behind the kindness, is a truth bigger than anything she's ready to face. Why would a billionaire follow a woman he met on the side of the road? And what does he really want from her? Help? Redemption? Or something far more dangerous? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The morning sun painted golden streaks across Claire Johnson's bedroom as she held up her favorite floral dress, examining it in the mirror. The soft cotton fabric, adorned with delicate pink and purple blooms, always made her feel pretty. But today, those familiar butterflies danced in her stomach as she thought about the blind date Miss Pearl had arranged. "Lord, give me strength," she whispered, smoothing the dress over her curves. The sweet aroma of banana nut muffins wafted up from her kitchen downstairs, reminding her she needed to check on them soon. Her grandmother's old kitchen timer chimed right on cue. Claire hurried down to her kitchen, where trays of golden brown muffins cooled on the counter. These weren't just any muffins. They were her grandmother's secret recipe, the backbone of Claire's small catering business. Times were tough lately, with bigger companies swooping up the corporate contracts she used to depend on, but she refused to give up. "One batch at a time," she murmured, carefully packaging the muffins for delivery later. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. Good things come to those who keep the faith. As she drove her well-loved Toyota sedan down the winding Georgia roads, Claire hummed "Amazing Grace," just as her grandmother had taught her years ago. The familiar melody helped calm her nerves about the upcoming date. Miss Pearl, bless her heart, meant well with her matchmaking, but Claire had learned to keep her expectations realistic. The morning air was thick with humidity, typical for Georgia this time of year. Through the windshield, Claire noticed steam rising from the hood of a black SUV pulled over on the shoulder ahead. A man in pressed khakis and a light blue button-down shirt stood there, looking completely lost. Claire's hand automatically moved to her turn. Signal. Her grandmother's voice whispered in her memory, "We help because we can, baby. That's all the reason we need." She glanced at her watch. 20 minutes until her date. The cafe wasn't far, but still. She sighed, flicked on her hazard lights, and pulled over anyway. The man turned as she approached, revealing a handsome but worried face. His soft brown eyes held a mix of relief and embarrassment. "Having some trouble?" Claire asked, offering a gentle smile. Yes," he admitted, running a hand through his neatly trimmed dark hair. "The engine just started steaming, and I have no idea why. I'm Michael, by the way." "Claire," she replied, noticing how his shoulders relaxed slightly at her friendly tone. "Mind if I take a look?" Michael stepped back, gesturing helplessly at the engine. "Please, I'm afraid cars aren't really my area of expertise." Claire leaned over the engine, careful not to brush against it with her dress. The source of the problem became clear almost immediately. "Ah, see this?" She pointed to a loose connection at the battery. "Your battery cables come loose. That's why your engine's overheating." Without hesitation, she rolled up her sleeves. "Here, let me show you how to fix this." She reached in, knowing full well she risked getting grease on her dress, but unable to leave this man stranded. "You just need to reconnect this cable nice and tight." Michael watched intently as she worked, his expression shifting from anxiety to admiration. "How do you know all this?" Claire smiled, remembering summer afternoons spent watching her father work on cars. "My daddy was a mechanic. He made sure his little girl knew her way around an engine." As she tightened the last connection, she noticed a dark smudge on her dress. Well, nothing to be done about it now. "Okay, try starting it up." Michael slid behind the wheel, turned the key, and the engine roared to life, strong and steady. He jumped out, his face lit up with genuine gratitude. "That's amazing. You just saved me from what would have been a very expensive tow truck bill. Please, let me repay you somehow." Claire waved him off with a laugh, already backing toward her car. "No need. Just pay it forward sometime." As she climbed back into her Toyota, she caught sight of her dress in the rearview mirror, definitely a noticeable grease mark right across the front. She'd have to hope her date would understand. Starting her engine, she gave Michael a final wave and pulled away. In her rearview mirror, she could see him still standing there, watching her car until it disappeared around the bend. Something about his expression made her heart flutter slightly, but she pushed the thought away. She had another man to meet, after all, even if she was going to be a few minutes late. The memory of Michael's grateful smile stayed with her as she drove, though she tried not to dwell on it. Sometimes the best moments in life came from simply choosing to be kind, even when it wasn't convenient. Her grandmother had taught her that too. Claire's fingers drummed lightly on the steering wheel as she approached town, her thoughts torn between the man she'd just helped and the man she was about to meet. The grease stain on her dress seemed to mock her careful preparation for the blind date, but she straightened her shoulders and took a deep breath. "What's meant to be will be," she whispered to herself, another of her grandmother's favorite sayings that had become her own personal mantra. The morning sun continued to climb in the sky as she made her way toward the cafe, carrying with her the satisfaction of having helped someone in need, even if it meant starting her date with a less-than-perfect appearance. Sometimes, she reflected, the best-laid plans had to make way for what the heart knew was right. Claire's hands trembled slightly as she pulled into the cafe parking lot, the digital clock on her dashboard showing 15 minutes past their arranged meeting time. The quaint storefront of the Garden Café usually brought her comfort with its cheerful window boxes full of bright petunias, but today it seemed to loom before her like a judge's bench. Deep breaths, she whispered to herself, checking her reflection in the rearview mirror. The grease mark on her dress looked even worse in the harsh afternoon sun, a dark smudge across the yellow flowers that no amount of dabbing with her emergency wet wipes had helped. Still, she'd done the right thing helping Michael, and surely her date would understand once she explained. The cafe's bell chimed as she pushed open the heavy glass door, the aroma of fresh coffee and baked goods wrapping around her like a familiar hug. Several couples sat at the round tables, their easy laughter and animated conversations filling the space with warmth. A young hostess with a bright smile approached. "Welcome to the Garden Café. Table for one?" "Actually, I'm meeting someone," Claire explained, trying to keep her voice steady. "A blind date arranged by Miss Pearl from First Baptist. I'm running a bit late, but he should be here." The hostess's smile faltered, her hand reaching beneath the counter to retrieve a folded piece of paper. "Oh. Are you Claire?" Claire's heart sank even before she took the note. "Yes, that's me." He waited for about 10 minutes. The hostess said softly, avoiding Claire's eyes. "When he saw you pull up he left this." The paper felt heavy in Claire's hands as she unfolded it. The message was brief, written in sharp, angular strokes. I don't waste time with people who can't make the effort to arrive on time or dress appropriately. Heat rushed to Claire's cheeks as she noticed the hostess's gaze lingering on the grease stain. I see, she managed. Well, could I just have a table and some water, please? Of course, the hostess replied, her voice thick with sympathy that only made everything worse. Claire followed her to a small table near the window, settling into the chair with as much dignity as she could muster. Around her, life continued its merry dance, couples sharing desserts, friends catching up over lattes, a grandfather teaching his granddaughter how to properly stir sugar into her hot chocolate. She felt simultaneously exposed and invisible, as if she were starring in her own personal tragedy that no one else could see. The ice water arrived in a tall glass, condensation beading on its surface like the tears Claire refused to let fall. She sipped slowly, watching the minutes tick by on the ornate clock above the counter. 15 minutes, 20, 30. At 40 minutes, she finally admitted to herself that she was only prolonging her own humiliation. Standing up, she left a $5 tip for the water. Perhaps a bit excessive, but somehow it felt important to show she wasn't the kind of person that note had implied. The hostess caught her eye as she walked out, offering a sympathetic smile that Claire acknowledged with a small nod. The drive home felt endless. The late afternoon sun painted everything in golden light, but Claire couldn't shake the chill of rejection. She took the long way, past the spot where she'd helped Michael earlier. The memory, which had felt so warm just hours ago, now seemed to mock her. No good deed goes unpunished, she thought, then immediately felt guilty for the bitterness. Her small house welcomed her with familiar silence. She moved through the rooms mechanically, changing out of the stained dress into comfortable sweats, warming up a bowl of yesterday's homemade vegetable soup in the microwave. The routine was familiar. How many nights had she spent like this, alone with her thoughts and her ledger? Setting the soup on the kitchen table, Claire pulled out her business accounts book. The numbers hadn't improved since yesterday. The column of expenses seemed to grow longer, while the income column remained stubbornly short. Her catering business, started with her grandmother's recipes and her own savings, was struggling to find its footing in a market that seemed to prefer flashy presentation over home-cooked comfort. She stirred the soup absently, the vegetables she'd carefully chopped yesterday, floating past her spoon like her drifting dreams. The warmth of the broth couldn't quite reach the cold spot in her chest where disappointment had settled. Lord, she whispered later that night, kneeling beside her bed as she had every night since she was a little girl. I know you have a plan. I could use a little strength right now, and maybe a sign that I'm on the right path. Across town, unknown to Claire, Michael Grant sat in his home office, the glow of his computer screen illuminating his concentrated expression. The Garden Cafe's website was open before him, but it offered no clues about the kind-hearted woman who'd helped him that morning. He clicked through local business directories, social media pages, anything that might lead him to Claire. Her smile had stayed with him all day, genuine, warm, expecting nothing in return for her kindness. In his world of corporate negotiations and calculated networking, such simple generosity felt like finding water in a desert. He couldn't shake the feeling that he'd let something important slip away by not asking for her full name or her number. The clock on his desk showed it was getting late, but Michael kept searching, determined to find some way to thank the woman who'd shown him such unexpected kindness. Tomorrow, he decided, he would drive back to that stretch of road, hoping perhaps to find some clue about where she might have been heading. Sunday morning dawned with a gentle pitter-patter against Claire's bedroom window. The soft rain created a peaceful melody that somehow made her feel less alone. She stood before her mirror, smoothing down her favorite yellow church dress, the one her grandmother had helped her pick out before she passed. The cheerful color felt like an act of defiance against yesterday's disappointment. The familiar brick walls of First Baptist welcomed her with their usual steady presence. Inside, the scent of lemon polish and old hymnals wrapped around her like a comfortable blanket. Claire slipped into her usual pew, letting the sound of the organ wash over her as the congregation filtered in. Miss Pearl spotted her immediately. The older woman's bright purple hat bobbed through the crowd as she made her way to Claire's side, her arms already opening for a hug. "Baby girl," Miss Pearl whispered, pulling Claire close. The familiar scent of lavender powder and peppermint filled Claire's nose. "I am so sorry about that foolish man. When I hear what he did—" She pulled back, her kind face creased with concern. That man didn't have sense enough to see a blessing when it was right in front of him. Claire managed a small smile. "It's okay, Miss Pearl. Really." "It most certainly is not okay," Miss Pearl declared, but lowered her voice as the choir began to assemble. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, though. Maybe he was protecting you from somebody who wasn't worthy of your time." The first notes of Amazing Grace filled the sanctuary, and Claire felt her spirits lift as she joined in the familiar melody. Her grandmother always said there was no trouble that couldn't be soothed by raising your voice in praise, and as Claire sang along with her church family, she felt the truth of those words deep in her bones. Throughout the service, Claire found herself surrounded by subtle gestures of support, a gentle pat on the shoulder from Deacon Williams, a warm smile from Mrs. Thompson, a squeeze of her hand from young Tracy, who helped in the nursery. These people weren't just her congregation, they were her extended family. After the final hymn, Claire drove home through clearing skies, her heart lighter than it had been since yesterday's humiliation. She had work to do. Mrs. Anderson's catering order wasn't going to prepare itself. In her kitchen, Claire moved with practiced efficiency, preparing individual portions of her grandmother's famous chicken and dumplings. Mrs. Anderson, a widow who lived 3 houses down, had ordered Sunday dinner for herself and 2 friends. It wasn't a big order, but Claire treated it with the same care she would give a wedding reception. "Just like you taught me, Grandma," she murmured, rolling out the dumpling dough with precise movements. Made with love, served with pride. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Claire was carrying 3 carefully packed containers up Mrs. Anderson's front walk. The rain had cleared, leaving everything fresh and gleaming. "Claire, honey." Mrs. Anderson opened the door before Claire could knock. The tiny woman's face lit up at the sight of the containers. "Right on time, as always. Come in, the girls are already here." Inside, Mrs. Anderson's living room held 2 other elderly ladies, both regular customers of Claire's catering service. They cooed over the perfectly arranged meals, the tender chicken, the fluffy dumplings, the fresh green beans with just a hint of bacon. "Nobody cooks like our Claire," Mrs. Anderson declared proudly, as if Claire was her own granddaughter. "Takes me right back to my mama's kitchen." Claire left them to their Sunday dinner, her heart full. These small moments, bringing joy through food, maintaining connections, keeping traditions alive. This was why she'd started her business in the first place. Back home, she spent the afternoon packaging leftover muffins from Saturday's baking. The nursing home always welcomed her baked goods, and she couldn't bear to see good food go to waste. She was wrapping the last batch when her phone buzzed. Expecting another catering inquiry, Claire absently checked her email. Then she froze, reading the message again. And again. "Dear Ms. Johnson, I represent an anonymous philanthropic investor interested in supporting local community-focused food businesses. Your name has come to our attention, and we would like to review your business proposal with the possibility of offering financial partnership. Our client is particularly interested in enterprises that demonstrate strong community connections and growth potential. Based on initial research, your catering service appears to align with these values. If you're interested in exploring this opportunity, please respond with any questions you may have about the process. Best regards, Marcus Thompson Grant and Associates Investment Firm. Claire sank into her kitchen chair, her hands trembling slightly. This had to be a mistake. Or a scam. But the email address looked legitimate, and the firm was real. She'd heard of them before. But why her? Her little catering business was barely staying afloat. What kind of investor would be interested in a small-town operation running out of a home kitchen? That evening, Claire, curled up on her couch with her laptop, the soft glow of the screen illuminating her face as she carefully composed a list of questions. Each one felt both necessary and presumptuous. What level of investment are you considering? Would this affect my ability to maintain personal relationships with current clients? How did you hear about my business? What are your expectations regarding growth and expansion? The questions multiplied as her mind raced with possibilities. Could this be the answer to her prayers? Or was it too good to be true? The gentle tick of her grandmother's old clock on the mantel kept her company as she typed, deleted, and retyped her thoughts. Eventually the words began to blur, and her head grew heavy. Claire's last conscious thought was a prayer of gratitude for this unexpected glimmer of hope, no matter where it might lead. The laptop's screen continued to glow softly beside her sleeping form, its light mixing with the gentle moonbeams filtering through her living room window. Outside, the last drops of Sunday's rain fell from the leaves, each one catching the moonlight like a tiny star falling to earth. Claire's alarm chimed at 5:30 in the morning, though she'd barely slept. The pre-dawn air held a crisp freshness as she padded to her kitchen, switching on lights and starting her morning routine. Her hands trembled slightly as she measured coffee grounds into the filter. Keep it together, she whispered to herself, smoothing down her carefully chosen navy blazer. It was her most professional outfit, purchased years ago for catering consultations that had never materialized. While the coffee brewed, filling her kitchen with its rich aroma, Claire triple-checked the meeting details on her phone. 9 o'clock sharp at the Grant Tech building downtown. She'd driven past the gleaming glass tower countless times, but never imagined she'd have reason to step inside. The sun was just beginning to paint the sky in soft pinks and oranges as Claire sat at her small kitchen table, sipping coffee and reviewing her prepared questions. She'd spent hours researching Grant and Associates, learning about their investment history and philanthropic work. Everything seemed legitimate, but something about it still felt too good to be true. At 8:15, Claire gathered her portfolio, took one final look in the mirror, and headed downtown. The morning traffic was lighter than she'd expected, leaving her with extra time to circle the block, trying to calm her nerves. The Grant Tech building stretched toward the clouds, its windows reflecting the morning sun like sheets of gold. Claire parked in the visitor's garage, checked her lipstick one last time, and walked through the revolving doors into the marble-floored lobby. "Good morning." The security guard greeted her warmly. "May I help you?" "Yes, I'm Claire Johnson. I have a 9 o'clock appointment with Marcus Thompson." After signing in and receiving a visitor's badge, Claire made her way to the bank of elevators. As she watched the numbers climb to the 40th floor, her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. "Stand tall, baby girl. You belong wherever your feet take you." The elevator doors opened to reveal a reception area that probably cost more than her entire house. A young woman in a crisp white blouse looked up from her desk with a professional smile. "Ms. Johnson, right this way, please." Claire followed her down a hallway lined with abstract art, their footsteps silent on the plush carpeting. The conference room took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city she'd called home all her life. "Mr. Thompson will be with you shortly," the receptionist said, gesturing to a leather chair. Would you like water or coffee? Water would be lovely, thank you. Left alone, Claire placed her portfolio on the gleaming table and tried not to fidget. The water glass sweated in her hands as she watched the city bustle far below. At precisely 9 o'clock, the door opened. Claire turned, ready to greet Marcus Thompson, and felt the world tilt beneath her feet. There, looking polished in a perfectly tailored suit but somehow just as nervous as he'd been by the roadside, stood Michael. The same Michael whose car she'd fixed on Saturday morning. Their eyes met, and Claire felt her mouth drop open in surprise. "Hello, Claire," he said softly, his voice carrying the same gentle tone she remembered. "I believe I owe you an explanation." Claire gripped the arms of her chair, trying to ground herself in reality. "You're Marcus Thompson?" He shook his head, moving to sit across from her. "No, I'm Michael Grant, CEO of Grant Tech Innovations." He offered a small, almost shy smile. "Though most people don't know what I look like, I prefer to keep a low profile, especially when it comes to philanthropic work." The pieces started falling into place in Claire's mind. The anonymous investor, the sudden interest in her tiny business, the prestigious firm reaching out of nowhere. The car trouble. Was that planned? "No," Michael said quickly, earnestly. "That was completely real. I'm embarrassingly bad with cars." His expression grew more serious. "But your kindness that morning, it moved me deeply. You didn't know who I was. You were clearly dressed for something important. But you stopped anyway, helped anyway, got your dress dirty anyway." Claire's throat tightened as he continued. "Later, I saw you at the cafe." His voice carried a note of anger. "I watched someone hurt you because they couldn't see past surface appearances. It felt familiar." He opened a folder in front of him, revealing detailed research about her catering business, her client base, her community involvement, her struggle to expand beyond her home kitchen. "I want to help," Michael said simply. "Not because I feel obligated, but because I believe in what you're doing. Your business model focuses on community connection and personal service. That's rare and valuable." He slid a document across the table. Claire's eyes widened at the figures. Enough to rent a commercial kitchen space, hire staff, expand her services while maintaining her core mission. "This isn't charity," Michael emphasized. "It's an investment. You'd maintain full creative control. We'd provide business guidance, marketing support, and capital for growth. In return, we ask for quarterly progress reports and a small percentage of profits once you're established." Claire stared at the proposal, her vision blurring slightly. "Why me?" she whispered. Michael's expression softened. "Because in 15 minutes by the side of the road, you showed more genuine compassion than I've experienced in years of business meetings. Because you deliver meals to seniors who can barely afford to pay you. Because you donate leftover baked goods to nursing homes instead of throwing them away." He smiled. "Because you're exactly the kind of person who deserves a chance to succeed." The meeting continued through the afternoon, with other team members joining to discuss details. Claire asked questions, took notes, and gradually felt her initial shock give way to cautious excitement. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the windows, Claire gathered her materials. Michael walked her to the elevator. "Take some time to think it over," he said. "Have your lawyer review everything. We can make adjustments if needed." Claire nodded, still feeling slightly dazed. The elevator doors opened and she stepped inside. Just before they closed, Michael spoke again. "Thank you, Claire, for stopping that morning, for showing me what real kindness looks like." The doors closed, and Claire descended 40 floors, her heart racing with possibilities. Outside, the streetlights were flickering to life, casting pools of golden light on the sidewalk. She stood for a moment, clutching her portfolio to her chest, looking up at the towering building where her life had just changed completely. Claire stared at her bedroom ceiling as the first rays of dawn crept through her curtains. Sleep had been elusive, her mind racing with numbers, possibilities, and the surreal events of yesterday afternoon. The contract papers lay spread across her kitchen table, where she'd left them at 3 a.m, covered in yellow, sticky notes marking her questions. She rolled over and checked her phone. 5:45. Her usual wake-up time was still 15 minutes away, but there was no point trying to sleep now. Pushing back her covers, Claire padded to the kitchen and started her coffee maker, the familiar gurgling sound somehow grounding her in reality. While the coffee brewed, she gathered the scattered papers into a neat pile, straightening her hastily written notes. The numbers were still staggering, enough funding to transform her home-based business into something truly sustainable. But it wasn't just the money that kept her mind spinning. It was the way Michael had looked at her, like he saw something valuable that others had missed. "Focus, Claire," she muttered to herself, pouring coffee into her grandmother's old china cup. One step at a time. By 8:30, Claire was back in the gleaming lobby of Grant Tech Innovations, her notebook filled with carefully organized questions. The same receptionist from yesterday greeted her with a warm smile and led her straight to Michael's office, a corner space with floor-to-ceiling windows that made Claire feel like she was floating above the city. Michael stood when she entered, looking more relaxed than yesterday in a light blue button-down shirt with his sleeves rolled up. "Good morning, Claire. Did you get any rest?" She laughed softly. "About as much as you did, I'm guessing." She noticed the coffee cups on his desk and the slight shadows under his eyes. "Guilty," he admitted, gesturing for her to sit in one of the comfortable chairs facing his desk. "I was up late thinking about this project, too." Claire settled into the chair and opened her notebook. "I have some questions about the proposal, if that's okay?" "Of course. That's why we're here." For the next hour, they went through her concerns point by point. Michael listened intently, clarifying terms and explaining business concepts in plain language when needed. He never made her feel small for asking, even when she struggled to understand some of the more complex financial arrangements. "So the profit sharing doesn't start until after the first year?" she confirmed, making another note. "Correct. We want to give you time to establish yourself properly before—" Michael paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "Actually, there's something else I wanted to discuss with you." Claire looked up from her notebook, noting the slight shift in his tone. "I'm launching a community business initiative next month," he continued. "It's aimed at supporting local entrepreneurs, especially in underserved areas." He stood and walked to the window, his reflection showing an unusual hint of uncertainty. "I'd like you to be part of it." "Part of it?" Claire echoed, confused. Michael turned back to face her. "As a consultant and co-presenter, your perspective, as someone who's built a business from the ground up, who understands the real challenges people face, would be invaluable." Claire felt her heart skip a beat. "Me? Present to—" She gestured vaguely at the imposing building around them. "To other entrepreneurs, community leaders, potential investors." Michael moved closer, his voice gentle but earnest. "Claire, I'm surrounded by corporate voices all day. People who understand spreadsheets but have never worried about making payroll or choosing between buying supplies and paying rent. You have something they don't. Authenticity. Real experience." Claire gripped her pen tighter, her grandmother's voice suddenly clear in her memory. "Opportunity doesn't knock twice, baby girl. When it does, you better be ready to answer the door." "I don't know anything about corporate presentations," she admitted softly. "That's exactly why I want you involved. This isn't about corporate speak. It's about reaching real people who need help growing their dreams. Michael sat on the edge of his desk, closing some of the formal distance between them. We can provide any training you need. He paused, showing that same vulnerability she'd glimpsed by the roadside. I trust your judgment more than I trust most of the consultants I've worked with. Claire looked down at her notebook, at all the careful questions she'd prepared about her own small business. This was so much bigger than she'd imagined. Her heart was racing, but underneath the fear was a spark of excitement. Can I think about it? She asked. Michael's face brightened. Of course. Take all the time you need. He reached for a folder on his desk. Here's some information about the initiative. Review it, sleep on it. We can talk more tomorrow if you'd like. By the time Claire left the office, the morning had stretched into early afternoon. She drove home in a daze, her mind already spinning with possibilities and fears in equal measure. The familiar sight of her small house helped steady her nerves. This was still home, still her foundation, no matter what changes might come. That evening, after warming up leftover chicken soup, Claire stood in her living room, facing the mirror above her fireplace. She held a wooden spoon like a microphone, feeling slightly foolish but determined. Good morning, everyone, she practiced, trying to sound confident. My name is Claire Johnson, and I'm here to talk about building a business from the heart. She grimaced at her reflection. Too cheesy, she muttered, then tried again. Hi, I'm Claire. I know what it's like to start with nothing but a dream and a whole lot of determination. She continued practicing, adjusting her posture, finding words that felt natural in her mouth. The sun set outside her windows, casting the room in soft shadows. But she kept going, drawing strength from the memory of her grandmother's unwavering faith in her. Finally, exhausted but somehow lighter, Claire got ready for bed. She stood for a moment in her bathroom, looking at herself in the mirror, not practicing now, just seeing. The same Claire as yesterday, but maybe with a little more steel in her spine. Taking a deep breath, she switched off the light. Okay, God, she whispered into the darkness. I guess we're doing this. Wednesday morning dawned with a hint of fall in the air. Claire stood in front of her closet, hands trembling slightly as she pushed hangers back and forth. She finally settled on her most professional outfit, a navy blue blazer over a cream blouse and matching slacks. The clothes felt like armor as she drove through the awakening city toward Grant Tech headquarters. The crisp breeze caught her hair as she walked from her car to the towering glass building. Michael was waiting in the lobby, his usual reserved smile warming when he saw her. Ready for the grand tour? He asked, holding up a security badge with her name and photo. Claire took the badge, its weight somehow making everything feel more real. As ready as I'll ever be. The elevator whisked them to the executive floor, where Michael began introducing her to his team. In the main conference room, several older executives in expensive suits looked up from their morning coffee. Their polite smiles didn't quite reach their eyes as Michael presented Claire as their new community initiatives consultant. Ms. Johnson will be providing valuable insight into our small business outreach program. Michael explained, his tone brooking no argument. Thomas Henderson, a silver-haired VP, raised his eyebrows. Fascinating. And your background is in catering, correct? Claire felt her cheeks warm, but kept her voice steady. Yes, sir. I run a family business that's been serving this community for 3 generations. How quaint, said Margaret Winters, another executive, her designer glasses glinting as she exchanged glances with her colleagues. Michael's hand touched Claire's elbow briefly. Claire brings exactly the kind of real-world experience this project needs. She understands our target demographic in ways that spreadsheets can't capture. As they moved through the office, Claire noticed younger assistants huddled by the coffee machine, whispering and stealing curious glances. One bold young woman in stilettos actually did a double take, her perfectly manicured hand freezing halfway to her mouth. "Don't mind them," Michael murmured as they walked past. Office gossip is their favorite sport. The morning blurred into a series of meetings and introductions. Claire's notebook filled with names, terms, and project details as she tried to absorb everything. Michael remained a steady presence beside her, carefully explaining concepts she didn't understand and ensuring she was included in every discussion. During one particularly tense meeting, Claire found her voice. The topic was outreach strategies for minority-owned businesses, and a marketing director named James was suggesting glossy mailers and social media influencers. "If I may," Claire interjected softly. "Most of the small business owners I know barely have time to check their email, let alone scroll through Instagram. They're usually working 16-hour days just to keep the lights on." The room fell silent. James's face tightened with annoyance, but Michael leaned forward, interested. "What would you suggest instead?" "Community partnerships," Claire said, gaining confidence. "Work with churches, local organizations, places where people already gather and trust each other. Word of mouth means everything in small communities." She saw several heads nodding thoughtfully, and Michael's pleased smile made her sit a little straighter. The afternoon found them reviewing proposal drafts in Michael's office. Claire was surprised by how easily they fell into a rhythm. She'd point out practical concerns from a small business perspective, and he'd adjust the corporate framework to address them. "You're good at this," he commented during a coffee break. "You see things we miss." Claire smiled, warming at the praise. "I'm just thinking about what would have helped me when I was starting out." As the day drew to a close, Michael insisted on walking her to her car. The parking garage was quiet, their footsteps echoing off concrete walls. Claire noticed he seemed lost in thought, his usual composed expression slipping slightly. "Everything okay?" she asked. Michael hesitated, then spoke softly. "Can I tell you something? Something I don't really talk about?" Claire nodded, sensing the weight in his words. "All this." He gestured vaguely at the building behind them. "The success. The money. Everyone thinks it means you have everything figured out. But sometimes I look around at my empty house, at all these people who want something from me but don't really know me, and I—" He trailed off, looking embarrassed. "And you feel lonely?" Claire finished gently. "Yeah." He gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. "Probably sounds ridiculous, complaining about being lonely when I'm so fortunate." "Having money doesn't make you immune to feeling alone," Claire said. "Feelings don't check your bank balance first." That earned her a genuine smile, and for a moment she caught a glimpse of the vulnerable man she'd met by the roadside, someone who needed help but wasn't used to asking for it. They reached her car, and Michael stepped back. "Thank you for today, for everything." "Thank you for believing in me," Claire replied, meaning it. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and scattered thoughts. Claire couldn't stop thinking about the softness she'd seen in Michael's eyes when he'd opened up to her, so different from his careful corporate mask. At home, she heated up leftover pasta and sat at her kitchen table, still in her blazer. Her feet ached from wearing heels all day, and her brain felt stuffed with new information. But underneath the exhaustion was a warm current of pride. She'd survived her first day in Michael's world. More than survived, she'd contributed something valuable. Later, crawling into bed, Claire said her nightly prayers with extra gratitude. "Thank you for giving me strength today," she whispered into her pillow. "And please help Michael find what he's looking for." She fell asleep almost immediately, her notebook still open on the nightstand, filled with tomorrow's possibilities. The Thursday morning sun painted golden stripes across Claire's kitchen counter as she hurriedly gulped down her second cup of coffee. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Outside whenever you're ready." She grabbed her worn leather, notebook, smoothed her navy dress, and stepped out into the crisp morning air. Michael's sleek black car sat in her driveway, looking oddly out of place in her modest neighborhood. He emerged from the driver's side, dressed more casually than she'd seen him before in dark jeans and a light blue button-down. "Good morning," he smiled, opening the passenger door for her. "Ready for our community tour?" Claire settled into the butter-soft leather seat, clutching her notebook. "More than ready. These are my people we're going to help." Their first stop was the Riverside Community Center, a fading brick building with peeling paint and a sign missing 3 letters. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered over worn linoleum floors, but the walls were covered with children's artwork and community announcements. "Miss Margaret?" Claire called out, and an elderly black woman emerged from an office, her face lighting up. "Claire Johnson, as I live and breathe." Miss Margaret embraced her warmly before turning curious eyes to Michael. "And who's this fine gentleman?" Claire introduced them, explaining their initiative. As Miss Margaret led them through the building, she detailed their struggles: the leaking roof, the ancient heating system, the after-school programs they could barely afford to run. Claire noticed Michael taking careful notes, his face growing more serious with each revelation. She touched his arm gently. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we need to expand our scope," he replied quietly. "This isn't just about business grants anymore." Their next stop was Jenkins Hardware, a family-owned store that had served the community for 3 generations. Mr. Jenkins, a weather-worn man in his 70s, showed them around the dusty aisles while explaining how the big box stores were slowly crushing his business. "How many local contractors still buy from you?" Claire asked thoughtfully. "About half what it used to be." Mr. Jenkins sighed. "Can't compete with those corporate prices?" "But you offer something they don't," Claire pointed out. "Experience, personalized service, same-day delivery for emergency repairs. Have you considered a partnership program with local contractors? Maybe special rates, priority service?" Michael watched her with growing admiration as she and Mr. Jenkins brainstormed ideas, her practical suggestions drawing hope into the old man's eyes. They visited 5 more businesses before lunch: a struggling bakery, a family-run auto shop, a small daycare center, a local bookstore, and a corner grocery. At each stop, Claire asked questions that got to the heart of their challenges, listening with genuine empathy while offering concrete solutions. "You have a gift for this," Michael observed as they walked back to his car. "You see both the problems and the possibilities." Claire shrugged modestly. "I've been where they are. Sometimes all people need is someone to really hear them and help them find a way forward." Speaking of forward, Michael glanced at his watch. "It's past 1 o'clock. Where would you recommend for lunch?" Claire's face brightened. "Oh, I know just the place. Turn left at the next light." She directed him to Miss Betty's Soul Food Kitchen, a cozy restaurant housed in an old converted house. The moment they walked in, a chorus of greetings erupted from the regular customers. "Claire Bear!" Miss Betty herself called from behind the counter, her round face beaming. "Who's this handsome man you brought us?" Claire felt her cheeks warm as she introduced Michael. The seniors scattered around the tables eyed him with undisguised interest, whispering and nudging each other. Miss Betty shooed them to the best table in the house and insisted on bringing out her daily specials without even taking their order. "Hope you like soul food," Claire said to Michael as plates of fried chicken, collard greens, mac and cheese, and cornbread appeared before them. "I love trying new things." he replied, then took a bite of the collard greens. His eyes widened. This is incredible. Miss Betty's cooking could solve world peace. Claire laughed. As they ate, she noticed Michael relaxing, his corporate persona softening in the warm, homey atmosphere. The seniors kept finding excuses to pass by their table, offering thinly veiled comments of approval. Nice to see Claire with such a polite young man. One elderly woman stage whispered to her friend. And so well dressed too. Michael caught Claire's embarrassed expression and grinned. I think I'm being vetted. They're just protective. Claire explained. They've known me since I was little. It's nice, he said softly, having people care that much. After lunch, they visited 3 more businesses before Michael drove her home. The setting sun cast long shadows across her front yard as they sat in his car, reviewing their notes from the day. I can't thank you enough, Michael said. You've completely changed how I'm seeing this project. I'm just glad I could help, Claire replied, gathering her things. See you tomorrow? Inside her house, despite her tiredness, Claire couldn't stop working. She spread her notes across her kitchen table, typing up detailed suggestions for each business they'd visited. Hours ticked by as she refined her ideas, adding personal touches she'd noticed during their visits. Her eyes burned from staring at her laptop screen, but she kept going, fueled by the memory of hope she'd seen in people's faces. It was well past midnight when she finally closed her computer and crawled into bed. As sleep overtook her, Claire dreamed of her grandmother's kitchen. The familiar scent of sweet potato pie filled the air as her grandmother stood at the stove, humming an old hymn. You're doing good work, baby girl, her grandmother said in the dream, turning to face her with that warm smile Claire missed so much. Keep following your heart. It knows the way. The dream felt so real that Claire could almost feel her grandmother's warm hand on her cheek, blessing her path forward. She slept deeply after that, her notebook still open on her nightstand, filled with possibilities for tomorrow. The seniors' caring faces, Michael's genuine interest in helping, and her grandmother's blessing in her dream all wove together into a tapestry of hope. Maybe this was what her grandmother had always meant about doors opening when you least expect them, not just for herself, but for her whole community. The morning sun streamed through Claire's kitchen window as she sipped her first cup of coffee, still in her comfortable flannel pajamas. Her phone buzzed suddenly, making her jump. Michael's name flashed on the screen. Claire, I'm sorry to call so early. His voice carried a mix of excitement and anxiety. Would you be willing to join a strategy session with my philanthropic board today? I know it's last minute, but your perspective would be invaluable. Claire's heart skipped. The board. Today? They've flown in from across the country. These are the people who will ultimately approve our community initiative. He paused. I understand if it's too short notice. Claire glanced at her calendar. She'd planned to catch up on paperwork, but this was too important to pass up. What time? 10 o'clock? I can send a car. No need, I'll drive myself. Text me the details. After hanging up, Claire rushed to her bedroom, yanking open her closet doors. She pulled out her nicest black pencil skirt and a crisp white blouse, items she usually saved for special occasions. Her hands trembled slightly as she applied mascara and smoothed her hair into a neat bun. Standing before her mirror, Claire took deep breaths to calm her racing heart. You can do this, she whispered to her reflection. She grabbed her leather portfolio, a gift from her grandmother when she'd started her catering business, and filled it with carefully organized notes from the week's visits. The drive to Grant Tech's headquarters felt shorter than usual. Claire parked in the visitor's lot, checked her lipstick one final time, and walked purposefully toward the gleaming building. The security guard recognized her now, offering a friendly nod as she passed. Michael waited by the elevators, his face lighting up when he saw her. "Thank you for coming," he said softly. "Just be yourself. That's exactly what they need to hear." The boardroom was intimidating. All dark wood and leather chairs with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 12 people sat around the massive table, their expressions ranging from politely curious to skeptically reserved. Claire recognized some faces from business magazines and news coverage. "Everyone," Michael began. "This is Claire Johnson, the community consultant I mentioned. She's been instrumental in shaping our approach to the local initiative." Claire smiled warmly, taking the empty seat beside Michael. As the meeting progressed, she listened, intently, taking careful notes. When discussions turned to implementation strategies, she noticed several board members exchanging dubious glances about proposed budgets for food assistance programs. Taking a deep breath, Claire raised her hand. "May I share some perspective on this?" Michael nodded encouragingly. "I've seen food insecurity firsthand," Claire began, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "Not just through my catering work, but in my own life. When my grandmother passed away, I struggled to keep our family business afloat. There were months I had to choose between buying ingredients for catering orders and buying groceries for myself." The room grew quietly attentive. Claire continued, "But what I've learned from our community visits this week is that food isn't just about survival. It's about dignity. It's about culture. When we help local food businesses survive, we're preserving family recipes, traditions, and gathering places that hold communities together." She opened her portfolio, sharing specific examples from their visits. The elderly couple whose grocery store was the only fresh food source in their neighborhood. The single mother running a tamale business from her kitchen to support her children's education. "These aren't just businesses we'd be saving," Claire concluded. "They're lifelines, community anchors. When we invest in them, we invest in hope." The silence that followed felt endless. Then the board chairman, a distinguished woman with silver hair, leaned forward. "Mr. Grant, I see why you brought Ms. Johnson on board. This is exactly the ground-level insight we've been missing." The rest of the meeting flew by in a blur of productive discussion. Board members asked Claire thoughtful questions about community needs and implementation ideas. When the session ended, several lingered to shake her hand and express their appreciation for her candor. After the last board member left, Michael turned to Claire with pride shining in his eyes. "That was incredible. You moved them in a way no PowerPoint presentation ever could." Claire exhaled shakily, the tension finally leaving her shoulders. "I just spoke from my heart. That's exactly why it worked." Michael glanced at his watch. "Would you mind staying? We should practice for next week's presentation." They spent the afternoon in Michael's office, reviewing slides and rehearsing their parts. Claire couldn't help laughing at Michael's attempts to sound more casual, while he chuckled at her formal, corporate voice. "Just talk like you did in the board meeting," he suggested. "Your natural warmth is more powerful than any script." The sun was setting by the time they finished, casting orange light across the city skyline. Claire's stomach growled, reminding her she'd barely eaten all day. "You should head home," Michael said. "You've more than earned some rest." On her drive home, Claire stopped at a local deli, too tired to cook, sitting at her kitchen table with her sandwich. She marveled at how different her life looked from just a week ago. The same table where she'd worried over bills now held notes for a multi-million-dollar community initiative. Later, wrapped in her favorite soft robe, Claire pulled out her journal, another habit inherited from her grandmother. She wrote about the board meeting, trying to capture every detail while it was still fresh. But mostly she wrote about hope. Hope for her community, hope for the struggling business owners they'd met. And maybe, just maybe, hope for herself, too. Her pen moved across the page. Sometimes blessings come disguised as battery trouble on the side of the road. Sometimes second chances arrive in boardrooms instead of blind dates. And sometimes, Grandma, your voice is still so clear, reminding me to trust the path ahead, even when I can't see where it leads. The clock read 11:30 when Claire finally closed her journal. Her feet ached from her dress shoes, and her mind buzzed with presentation points. But her heart felt full. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more preparation, more changes. But for now, she allowed herself to simply feel grateful for this unexpected turn in her story. Claire woke before her alarm, watching the first hints of dawn creep through her bedroom window. Her stomach fluttered with nervous energy as she thought about the presentation ahead. After tossing and turning for several minutes, she finally pushed back her covers and padded to the kitchen. "Lord, give me strength," she whispered, her grandmother's favorite morning prayer coming naturally to her lips as she started the coffee maker. She couldn't manage more than a piece of toast with honey and half a banana for breakfast. Her presentation outfit, a navy blue dress with subtle white piping, hung pressed and ready on her closet door. She'd splurged on it yesterday, wanting to look professional but still feel like herself. The morning routine helped calm her nerves. Shower, moisturize, careful application of minimal makeup. As she twisted her hair into a neat bun, she could almost hear her grandmother's voice. "Stand tall, baby girl. You've got something to say, and they need to hear it." The drive downtown felt surreal. Streets she'd known all her life somehow looked different in the early morning light. Or maybe she was the one who was different now. Claire parked in the corporate garage at 7:45, 15 minutes earlier than necessary, but she wanted time to center herself. Michael was already waiting at the building's entrance, his tall frame casting a long shadow in the morning sun. Something in Claire's chest loosened at the sight of him. His presence had become surprisingly comforting over the past week. "Good morning," he said warmly, holding out a paper cup. "I got you some tea. Chamomile with honey. My mother always said it helps with presentation nerves." Claire accepted the cup gratefully, touched by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you. I didn't expect you to be here so early." "Couldn't sleep," he admitted with a small smile. "Too excited about today." They rode the elevator in comfortable silence, sipping their drinks. The office was quiet, with only a few early arrivals at their desks. Michael led them to the conference room to do one final review of their presentation materials. "Remember," he said as they arranged their notes, "you don't need to stick exactly to the script. Just speak from your heart like you did last week. That's what will move them." Claire nodded, smoothing her dress. "I keep telling myself they're just people, like the seniors at my church, just in fancier suits." Michael chuckled. "Exactly. And between you and me, half of them fall asleep during PowerPoint presentations anyway." His gentle teasing helped ease her tension. They spent the next hour going over key points and testing the projection equipment. Other employees began filtering in, nodding respectfully to Michael and giving curious glances to Claire. At 9:55, board members started arriving. Claire recognized the silver-haired chairwoman from Friday's meeting, who gave her an encouraging smile. Michael squeezed her shoulder briefly before moving to greet the attendees. At exactly 10 o'clock, Michael called the meeting to order. "Good morning, everyone. We're here today to present a comprehensive community investment initiative that we believe will transform local food security and small business sustainability in our region." He began with an overview of the project's scope, his quiet confidence setting the perfect tone. When he introduced Claire, his voice held genuine respect. "Ms. Johnson brings invaluable ground-level expertise and community insight to this initiative. She'll share specific examples of how these programs could impact real lives in our target neighborhoods. Claire stood, her hands steady as she clicked to her first slide. Thank you, Mr. Grant. As someone who grew up in one of these neighborhoods, I'd like to start with a story. She told them about Miss Pearl's grandson, who'd wanted to expand his grandmother's soul food restaurant, but couldn't get traditional bank funding. About the veteran on disability, who relied on her weekly meal deliveries. About the young mother who dreamed of turning her grandmother's tamale recipe into a legitimate business. As she spoke, Claire felt her nervousness transform into passionate conviction. These weren't just statistics on slides. These were her neighbors, her community, her extended family. She watched understanding dawn in the board members' eyes as she connected financial projections to human impact. Michael seamlessly took over to detail the implementation strategy, building on Claire's examples. They moved through their presentation like dancing partners, each knowing exactly when to step forward or back, their different perspectives weaving together into a compelling whole. When they finished, the board chairman leaned forward. This is exactly the kind of innovative, community-centered initiative we've been hoping to see. The human element Ms. Johnson brings adds crucial perspective to Mr. Grant's strategic planning. The vote was unanimous. As board members filed out, several stopped to shake Claire's hand, offering warm congratulations. The silver-haired chairwoman clasped her hand in both of hers. My dear, you've helped us see these numbers as neighbors. That's no small feat. When the last board member left, Claire collapsed into her chair, emotion overwhelming her. We did it, she whispered. You did it, Michael corrected gently. I just provided the framework. You gave it heart. He checked his watch. Have dinner with me to celebrate? Claire hesitated, but only briefly. I'd like that. Michael chose a small bistro several blocks from the office, casual enough that Claire felt comfortable, but nice enough to feel special. They sat at a corner table near a window, watching the city transition from day to evening. I have to admit, Michael said as they studied their menus, I was terrified when I first walked into that boardroom last week. All that money, all that responsibility, it can be overwhelming. Claire looked up, surprised by his candor. You hide it well. Years of practice. He smiled ruefully. But working with you this week, it's reminded me why I wanted to do this work in the first place. To make real differences in real lives. Their conversation flowed easily over shared appetizers and entrees. Claire told him about learning to cook at her grandmother's knee, about her dreams for her catering business. Michael shared stories about his early days building his company, his voice softening when he spoke about his mother's influence on his philanthropy. The sky outside deepened to purple, then indigo, city lights twinkling to life. Neither seemed to notice the time passing until their waiter brought the check. Michael insisted on paying, reminding her it was a celebration. As they walked to their cars in the cool evening air, Claire felt a profound sense of contentment. Not just from the successful presentation or the pleasant dinner, but from the feeling that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The drive home felt different from her morning commute. The same streets now seemed full of possibility. Claire hummed along with the radio, remembering the way the board members' faces had lit up during her presentation, the way Michael had beamed with pride. Entering her apartment, she kicked off her shoes and changed into comfortable clothes, but the day's glow lingered. She'd done more than survive a corporate presentation. She'd helped create something that would make real changes in her community. Her grandmother would have been so proud. Curled up on her couch with a cup of chamomile tea, Claire let herself fully feel the joy of the day. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, new opportunities. But tonight, she simply savored the knowledge that a new chapter of her life had truly begun. Claire woke to golden sunlight streaming through her bedroom window, her heart still light from yesterday's triumph. The memory of the successful presentation and dinner with Michael brought a smile to her face as she stretched and got ready for the day. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror showed bright eyes and renewed energy. Such a change from the discouraged woman she'd been just weeks ago. In her small commercial kitchen, Claire hummed along to gospel music while preparing her daily orders. The familiar motions of measuring, mixing, and baking centered her. She'd just pulled a tray of blueberry muffins from the oven when her phone buzzed. Michael's name lit up the screen. "Good morning," she answered cheerfully, setting the hot tray on a cooling rack. "Claire." Michael's voice started warm, but shifted to something more hesitant. "How are you?" "I'm wonderful. Still riding high from yesterday." She wedged the phone between her ear and shoulder while beginning to package cooled pastries. "Listen." He paused. "There's something we need to discuss. Have you been online this morning?" Claire's hand stilled. "No, I've been baking since dawn. Why?" There's a rumor starting to circulate. About us." Michael's voice tightened. "Someone took photos that day you helped me with my car. They're trying to spin it into something it wasn't." Claire's stomach dropped. She quickly pulled up a news site on her tablet, and there it was. Grainy photos of her crouched by Michael's SUV, his hand on her shoulder as they examined the engine. The headline made her feel sick. "Billionaire's new consultant. Strategic seduction on a country road." "Oh no," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, Claire. My PR team is working on it, but—" Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through the article. They dug into her business records, highlighting her financial struggles, made snide implications about how she'd conveniently appeared just when the wealthy CEO needed help. Even suggested she'd deliberately sabotaged his car. "But that's ridiculous," she protested. "Anyone who knows me—" "I know," Michael said softly. "But they don't know you. They just see what they want to see." Throughout the afternoon, Claire tried to focus on her work, but her phone kept buzzing with notifications. More articles appeared. Social media exploded with cruel speculation. Someone had found her business page and was leaving vicious reviews, calling her a gold digger and worse. Miss Pearl called around 3 o'clock, her voice sharp with concern. "Baby girl, are you seeing all this nonsense they're writing about you?" "I'm trying not to look," Claire admitted, but even as she said it, she was refreshing her phone screen, watching the comments multiply. "Don't you pay those vultures any mind?" Miss Pearl insisted. Lord knows they'll make up any story to sell papers. But it was impossible not to look, impossible not to feel each nasty comment like a physical blow. People who'd never met her were dissecting her character, her motives, her worth. They'd found photos from her social media, including one of her in the same dress she'd worn that day, now used as evidence she'd planned the encounter. At 5:30, an email arrived from Grant Tech's PR department. The carefully worded message suggested that, given the current climate, it would be best to maintain professional distance until the situation stabilized. They advised her not to make any public statements or engage with the press. Claire sat at her kitchen table, staring at her phone as darkness gathered outside. Michael hadn't called again. She understood why. Any contact now would just feed the flames, but his silence hurt more than she wanted to admit. She'd thought she was starting something meaningful, both professionally and personally. Now it felt like it was all crumbling, tainted by ugly assumptions and malicious gossip. When her phone rang again, she grabbed it hopefully, but it was just another reporter seeking comment. She declined the call, then turned off her phone entirely. The sudden silence felt both relieving and lonely. Sleep proved elusive that night. Claire lay in bed, watching shadows move across her ceiling as cars passed outside. Her mind kept replaying moments from the past week, the warmth in Michael's eyes when he praised her ideas, their shared laughter at dinner, the pride she'd felt presenting to the board. Had she been naive to think she could step into his world without consequences? Every time she started to drift off, a new worry would jolt her awake. What about her catering clients? Would they believe these horrible stories? Would this scandal hurt the community initiative they'd worked so hard to launch? And Michael? Was he lying awake too? Or had his PR team already crafted a strategy to distance him from the whole mess? The hours crept by with excruciating slowness. 2 o'clock. 3 o'clock. 4. Claire watched the numbers change on her bedside clock, her chest tight with anxiety. Outside her window, the sky began to lighten, dark blue fading to grey. Still, sleep wouldn't come. She thought about her grandmother, wondering what wisdom she would have offered in this situation. Probably something about holding your head high and letting the truth speak for itself. But in this age of instant news and viral stories, did the truth even matter anymore? Dawn finally broke, painting her bedroom walls in pale pink light. Claire hadn't slept at all, but she felt oddly alert, the kind of sharp-edged awareness that comes with emotional exhaustion. She sat up slowly, already dreading what new stories might have emerged overnight. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on her shoulders as she contemplated the day ahead. Should she open the bakery as usual? Hide away until this blew over? Try to defend herself? The calm PR team's warning about maintaining distance echoed in her mind, along with all the cruel comments she'd read. Her phone sat silent and dark on her nightstand, like a bomb waiting to explode. She wasn't ready to turn it back on, wasn't ready to face whatever fresh accusations the morning had brought. Instead, she wrapped her arms around her knees and watched the sun rise, feeling more alone than she had in years. The morning sun struggled through heavy clouds as Claire pulled into Grant Tech's parking garage. Her eyes felt swollen and gritty from lack of sleep, and her usual confident stride had been replaced by hesitant steps. She'd chosen her most professional outfit, a navy blazer and matching skirt, like armor against what she knew was coming. The security guard, who usually greeted her with a friendly smile, now avoided eye contact. In the elevator, 2 young employees whispered behind their hands, falling silent when they noticed her presence. Each small rejection stung like a paper cut, minor wounds that added up to something unbearable. The conference room on the top floor felt colder than usual. Claire sat down at the long mahogany table, hands folded tightly in her lap to keep them from shaking. The PR team filed in first. 3 men and 2 women in sharp suits, their faces set in professionally neutral expressions. They spread out documents and tablets with precise movements, not acknowledging her presence. Michael arrived last, looking as tired as Claire felt. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usual neat appearance seemed slightly rumpled, as if he'd been running his hands through his hair all morning. When their eyes met, she saw a flash of warmth, quickly buried under professional distance. "Let's address this situation directly," the head of PR began, his voice clipped. He was an older man with steel-grey hair and wire-rimmed glasses that caught the fluorescent lights. "The media narrative is spiraling. We need immediate damage control." He clicked through a series of screenshots on the main screen. Tabloid headlines, social media posts, comment sections filled with ugly speculation. Claire forced herself to look, though each image felt like another blow. "Our recommendation," a younger woman continued, "is a complete pause on all public association between Mr. Grant and Ms. Johnson until this dies down. We'll issue a statement clarifying that Ms. Johnson was briefly consulted for community outreach, nothing more." "But the initiative," Claire started, her voice smaller than she intended. "All those people we promised to help can be handled through other channels." The woman cut in smoothly. The priority has to be protecting the company's reputation. Claire watched Michael's hands tighten on the arms of his chair. She could see the conflict playing across his face, the businessman warring with the man she'd gotten to know over the past week. There has to be another way, he said finally. Claire's insights are valuable to this project. She understands the community in ways we don't. With all due respect, Mr. Grant, another PR team member spoke up, we're looking at serious potential damage to shareholder confidence. These rumors suggest impropriety in business dealings, possible manipulation. That's ridiculous, Michael interrupted, anger finally breaking through his professional facade. Anyone who's spent 5 minutes with Claire knows. It doesn't matter what we know, the first man said firmly. It matters what the public believes, and right now they're believing the worst. Claire felt something crack inside her chest. She'd been naive to think she could bridge these two worlds, her small, community-focused life and Michael's corporate empire. The distance between them suddenly seemed vast and uncrossable. Michael, she said softly, and everyone turned to look at her. She straightened her shoulders, summoning every ounce of dignity she possessed. They're right. Claire, no. I won't be the reason you jeopardize everything you've built. Her voice was steady, though her heart was shattering. Your company does important work. It helps people. That matters more than any of this. She stood up, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. I'll step back from the initiative. You can find someone else to help with community outreach. Someone without... She gestured vaguely at the screen, still showing cruel headlines. Complications. The PR team's relief was palpable. Michael half rose from his chair, conflict written across his features, but Claire was already moving towards the door. She couldn't bear to hear whatever carefully worded response his team had prepared. Thank you for the opportunity, she said formally, not meeting anyone's eyes. I wish you all the best. The walk to the elevator felt endless. Each step echoed in the quiet hallway, marking her retreat from a world she'd briefly thought she could belong in. The doors closed on her last glimpse of the office, where so many hopes had bloomed and withered in the space of a week. Outside, the afternoon sun seemed harsh and unforgiving, throwing every detail into sharp relief. The gleaming corporate buildings, the expensive cars, the well-dressed people hurrying past. None of it belonged to her world anymore. Claire drove home on autopilot, barely registering the familiar streets. Inside her small house, the silence pressed in around her. She moved through the rooms like a ghost, finally sinking onto her living room couch. Her phone weighed heavy in her pocket, full of messages she couldn't bear to read. With mechanical movements, she turned it off and set it on the coffee table. The screen went dark, severing her last connection to the whirlwind that had swept through her life. She pulled her grandmother's old Afghan around her shoulders, but its familiar comfort couldn't reach the cold emptiness in her chest. The afternoon light slanted through her windows, painting patterns on the floor. Claire watched them move, feeling hollow and lost. Everything she'd dreamed about, helping her community, building something meaningful, maybe even finding a connection with someone who understood her heart, had dissolved like morning mist. She sat there as the shadows lengthened, her heart in pieces, wondering how something that had started with such simple kindness could end in so much pain. Thursday morning arrived with a gentle mist, the kind that made everything look soft and slightly blurred around the edges. Claire stood in her kitchen, staring at the empty mixing bowls lined up on her counter. The familiar sight anchored her, pulling her thoughts away from corporate boardrooms and scandal headlines. Focus on what you can control, she whispered to herself, her grandmother's favorite advice. The words felt like a lifeline. She tied on her apron, the well-worn fabric settling around her waist like an old friend. Her hands moved automatically, measuring flour, sugar, and spices. The routine of baking had always been her comfort, and today she needed it more than ever. The kitchen slowly filled with the warm scent of vanilla and cinnamon as batch after batch of muffins rose in the oven. Claire worked steadily, letting the familiar motions calm her racing thoughts. When tears threatened, she wiped them away with her sleeve and kept going. By mid-morning, her counters were covered with cooling racks full of perfectly golden muffins, blueberry, banana nut, and the cinnamon streusel that Mr. Jenkins from the senior centre always requested. She packed them carefully into boxes, along with the day's meal deliveries. Loading her car took 3 trips, each container arranged just so. Claire checked her delivery list twice, making sure she hadn't forgotten anyone. These weren't just customers, they were her extended family, the people who'd watched her grow up and supported her through every setback. Her first stop was Mrs. Anderson's little blue house on Maple Street. The elderly widow was already waiting on her porch, rocking slowly in her favorite chair. "There's my sweet girl," Mrs. Anderson called out, her weathered face creasing with concern. "I've been thinking about you." Claire's heart sank. So the stories had reached here too. "Mrs. Anderson, Now don't you start explaining anything to me," the older woman interrupted, rising slowly from her chair. "I've known you since you were knee-high to a grasshopper. Anyone who'd believe bad things about you doesn't know you at all." Unexpected tears pricked at Claire's eyes as Mrs. Anderson wrapped her in a tight hug that smelled of talcum powder and fresh laundry. "Thank you," Claire whispered. "Brought your favorite sweet tea," Mrs. Anderson said, patting her cheek. "Come sit for a minute." They settled on the porch, and Claire let the familiar comfort of Mrs. Anderson's chatter wash over her. The older woman didn't mention the scandal directly, but her steady stream of neighborhood news and gentle encouragement felt like a balm. As Claire drove to her next delivery, she felt a little lighter. Each stop brought similar moments of support. Mr. Jenkins insisted on showing her his new rose bushes. The Thompson sisters made her promise to join their weekly card game. Miss Dorothy pressed a container of homemade soup into her hands, saying firmly, "Can't fight battles on an empty stomach." By early afternoon, Claire had reached Miss Pearl's house. The older woman was waiting in her garden, pruning shears in hand. One look at Claire's face, and she set them down. "Come here, baby girl," she said, opening her arms. Claire practically fell into the embrace, letting out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "I feel so foolish," she admitted, her voice muffled against Miss Pearl's shoulder. "Thinking I could step into that world, that I belonged there." "Now you stop that right now," Miss Pearl said firmly, holding Claire at arm's length. "You belong anywhere you choose to be. The only fool is anyone who can't see your worth." She led Claire to the wooden bench beneath her flowering dogwood tree. Taking Claire's hands in hers, she squeezed them tight. "Storms pass," Miss Pearl said, her voice gentle but firm. "Stand firm. Your roots go deep in this community, deeper than any scandal or gossip." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching butterflies dance through Miss Pearl's garden. The afternoon sun filtered through the dogwood branches, creating patterns of light and shadow that shifted with the breeze. "Remember when you first started your business?" Miss Pearl asked suddenly. "After your grandmother passed?" Claire nodded, remembering those difficult days. "Everyone said it was too risky, that you should get a regular job instead. But you knew what was in your heart, and you followed it. That's the same strength you need now." The words settled deep in Claire's chest, warming something that had felt frozen since that terrible meeting. Over the next few days, Claire threw herself into her work. She took every small order that came her way, grateful for the distraction. Friday brought a birthday celebration for twins at the senior center. Saturday was filled with delivering box lunches to a church fundraiser. Each interaction with her community helped rebuild her confidence, piece by tiny piece. The seniors' unwavering support formed a protective barrier against the outside world's judgment. Their stories, their laughter, their simple acceptance reminded her of who she was at her core. By Sunday evening, Claire sat on her back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Her phone remained off, tucked away in a kitchen drawer. The scandal still existed, but it felt more distant now, less able to touch the essential parts of her. She sipped her tea, feeling the gentle weight of Miss Pearl's words from Thursday. Storms pass, stand firm. A cardinal landed on her bird feeder, its bright red feathers catching the last rays of sunlight. Claire watched it, feeling a fragile sense of peace settle over her. The stability she felt wasn't complete. There were still moments when doubt and hurt crept in. But it was growing, taking root in the rich soil of community love and support. She might have lost her chance at a grand corporate partnership, but she hadn't lost herself. In her grandmother's old recipe box, there was a card that read, "Bake with love. Serve with joy." Claire had always thought it was just about food, but now she understood it was about life, too. Love and joy were still possible, even in the midst of heartache. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Claire felt something shift inside her. The pain wasn't gone, but it had changed shape, becoming more manageable. She could breathe again, could see beyond the immediate hurt to the possibility of tomorrow. She still had her hands that could bake, her heart that could care, and a community that believed in her. Maybe for now that was enough. Monday morning arrived with a gentle mist hanging in the air. Claire pulled into her bakery's parking lot at 5:30, earlier than usual. Her heart nearly stopped when she saw shapes moving in the pre-dawn darkness near her door. For a moment, fear gripped her. Had reporters come to harass her? But then she recognized Mrs. Wilson's floral house dress and Mr. Johnson's worn baseball cap. As she stepped out of her car, more familiar faces emerged from the shadows. At least 8 seniors from the neighborhood stood waiting, carrying covered baskets and paper bags. "What are you all doing here so early?" Claire asked, her voice catching. Mrs. Wilson stepped forward, her silver hair gleaming in the security light. "We thought you might need some help getting started today, dear." As Claire unlocked the door with trembling hands, Mr. Johnson cleared his throat. "Plus, we heard some folks might be staying away because of those nasty stories. Well, we're here to show them what's what." Inside, as Claire flipped on the lights, she found her counter covered in notes and cards. The seniors had been busy, spreading the word through their church groups and social circles. Miss Thompson proudly showed Claire a letter she'd written to the local newspaper defending her character. "We may be old," she said, adjusting her glasses, "but we know a good heart when we see one." Throughout the morning, the seniors stationed themselves at tables, ordering coffee and pastries, creating a warm, welcoming atmosphere. Their presence drew in other customers who might have hesitated. Some regulars who'd stayed away returned, encouraged by seeing the familiar faces. By lunch, Claire's kitchen hummed with activity as she filled orders for meat pies and sandwich platters. Her hands moved steadily through the familiar motions of kneading dough and crimping crusts, finding comfort in the rhythm. Across town, Michael Grant sat in his corner office, staring at his computer screen. News clips and social media posts flickered past, each one twisting the story further from truth. One tabloid showed the grainy photo of Claire helping him with his car, the headline screaming, "Gold digger or genius con artist." Another video featured a supposed body language expert analyzing their interactions at community meetings, suggesting Claire had manipulated him through calculated gestures and expressions. The absurdity of it would have been laughable if it wasn't so cruel. Michael minimized the windows, unable to watch anymore. His calendar showed back-to-back meetings, but he couldn't face them. Not today. Not when every corporate smile would hide whispered judgments about his judgment, his weakness for a pretty face, his naivety. "Cancel everything," he told his assistant through the intercom. "I'm taking a personal day." Ignoring her surprised response, he grabbed his jacket and headed for the elevator. The security of his usual dark car and driver felt suffocating. Instead, he walked, letting his feet carry him toward Riverside Park. The late morning sun had burned away the mist, leaving behind a crisp autumn day. Michael loosened his tie as he walked, barely noticing the curious glances from joggers who recognized him. His mind kept returning to that meeting with the PR team, to Claire's face as she quietly excused herself. He had failed her. After all her genuine kindness, her brilliant insights, her trust in him, when she needed him most, he had frozen. Let others dictate their response, hidden behind corporate protocol and reputation management. A group of children ran past, their laughter echoing across the park. Michael found an empty bench overlooking the river and sat heavily. The water moved steadily past, unchanging despite the chaos humans created on its shores. He pulled out his phone, opening a draft of a public statement he'd written the night before. The words felt hollow, too careful, too corporate. "Recent speculation regarding my professional relationship with Claire Johnson has been both inaccurate and unkind. Ms. Johnson has demonstrated nothing but integrity in our business dealings." His thumb hovered over the post button, then retreated. Would this help, or just fuel more speculation? Would it protect Claire, or draw more unwanted attention? The same questions that had paralyzed him in that conference room swirled through his mind. The afternoon stretched on as Michael walked the park's winding paths, his polished shoes gathering dust. Other park-goers gave him space, perhaps sensing his need for solitude. Or perhaps they'd seen the news and were drawing their own conclusions. As shadows lengthened across the grass, he found himself back at his office. The building loomed above him, glass and steel reaching toward the darkening sky. Inside his office, he revised the statement again and again, each version feeling more inadequate than the last. Evening settled over the city. Michael's office lights remained on, a single bright square in the towering facade. On his screen, the cursor blinked accusingly at the end of his latest attempt to set things right. His finger rested on the mouse, not quite able to click send. The words were true, carefully crafted to defend without inflaming. But they were also safe, distant, professional. Everything that had kept him lonely and isolated before Claire crashed into his life with her genuine warmth and unflinching kindness. The cursor continued its steady rhythm as Michael sat in his ergonomic chair, trapped between action and hesitation, watching night claim the city beyond his window. The sun had barely crested the horizon when Michael Grant paced his home office, running his fingers through his disheveled hair. He hadn't slept well, his mind churning with thoughts of Claire and the mess he'd allowed to grow around her. His laptop sat open on his desk, camera ready, but he'd been stalling for the past hour. Finally, he took a deep breath and settled into his chair. No tie, no jacket, just a simple blue button-down shirt. He wanted to look honest, approachable, real. With slightly trembling fingers, he pressed record. "Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Grant, and I need to set the record straight about Claire Johnson." He paused, swallowing hard. Corporate speeches were easy. This was terrifying. But Claire deserved the truth. "That photo everyone's sharing, that's the day we met. My car broke down, and Claire stopped to help me. She didn't know who I was. She was actually on her way to a blind date, but she stopped anyway. Got grease all over her dress helping a complete stranger. His voice grew stronger as he continued, the words flowing naturally now. Claire never asked me for money, never hinted at it. When I later reached out to invest in her business, it was my idea, because I saw someone with incredible talent and a genuine heart for her community. The rumors about manipulation? They couldn't be further from the truth. Claire Johnson is the most genuine person I've met in years. Michael leaned closer to the camera, his eyes intense. In fact, I'm the one who should be apologizing, to Claire and to all of you. I should have spoken up sooner. I let fear of making things worse keep me quiet while a good person's reputation was attacked. That stops today. He spoke for several more minutes, sharing stories about Claire's work with seniors, her insights during meetings, her unfailing kindness. When he finally stopped recording, his hands were shaking, but his heart felt lighter. After watching it through once, fighting the urge to re-record it with more polish, he uploaded the video to his social media accounts. His finger hovered over the post button for just a moment before pressing it firmly. Then came the waiting. Michael tried to work, but found himself checking the video every few minutes. The view count climbed steadily. 1,000, 5,000, 10,000. Comments began pouring in. Finally, someone speaking up for what's right. I knew those rumors couldn't be true. We love you, Claire. Keep feeding our community. By early afternoon, the video had gone viral. Local news stations were picking it up, sharing clips and positive commentary. The tide of public opinion was turning rapidly. Across town, Claire was in her kitchen, focusing on work and trying to ignore her phone. She'd turned off notifications days ago, tired of the cruel messages. The gentle rhythm of rolling dough and measuring ingredients helped quiet her mind. At 6 o'clock, just as she was pulling a batch of dinner rolls from the oven, someone started pounding on her front door. The familiar voice of Miss Pearl rang out, "Claire Johnson, you open this door right now!" Claire hurried to the door, wiping flour from her hands. Miss Pearl burst in, waving her phone excitedly. "Have you seen it? Have you seen what that man did?" "What man? What are you talking about?" Claire asked, confused by her friend's enthusiasm. "Michael Grant. Here, sit down and watch this right now." Miss Pearl guided Claire to her couch, holding up her phone. Claire's heart skipped as Michael's face filled the screen. She watched in stunned silence as he defended her character, shared their true story, and took responsibility for his silence. When it ended, Miss Pearl immediately pressed play again. "Watch it one more time, sugar. Really listen to what he's saying." Claire did, tears filling her eyes. Not because of Michael's wealth or position, not even because of the public apology, but because of his humility, the genuine remorse in his voice, the way he spoke about her with such respect and warmness. "Over 50,000 shares already," Miss Pearl reported proudly. "And the comments? Lord, they're enough to make you cry. People are finally seeing the truth about you, baby girl." Claire wiped her eyes, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say. I don't know what happens next." Miss Pearl patted her hand. "You don't need to know right now. Just be grateful for the truth being spoken. Everything else will work itself out in time." They sat together on the couch as evening settled in, Miss Pearl reading encouraging comments aloud while Claire listened, her heart full but uncertain. When Miss Pearl finally left, Claire got ready for bed, her mind replaying Michael's words. Lying in the darkness, she felt lighter knowing the truth was out there. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring. For now, it was enough to know that someone had cared enough to stand up and speak the truth, regardless of the cost to his carefully maintained image. She drifted off to sleep with the memory of Michael's earnest face in her mind, his words echoing. Claire Johnson is the most genuine person I've met in years. Dawn crept softly through Claire's kitchen windows as she mixed dough with practiced hands. The familiar motions brought comfort. Measuring flour, cutting in butter, adding just enough buttermilk to make the perfect biscuits. She'd been at it since 5 o'clock in the morning, finding peace in the rhythm of baking. The morning crowd had settled into their usual spots by 10:30, Mrs. Henderson with her crossword puzzle, Mr. Lewis reading his newspaper, and a handful of other regulars sharing coffee and conversation. The bell above the door chimed, and Claire glanced up from behind the counter. Michael stood in the doorway, looking slightly uncertain. He held a modest bouquet of daisies, nothing fancy or elaborate, just simple flowers that reminded Claire of summer meadows. The usual chatter in the bakery quieted as he walked toward the counter, his steps measured and careful. "Could we talk?" he asked softly. "Somewhere private?" Claire nodded, gesturing toward the small office behind the kitchen. She could feel the seniors watching intently, their protective concern almost tangible in the air. In the quiet of her office, Michael's shoulders dropped slightly, his carefully maintained composure giving way to genuine emotion. "I'm sorry," he began, offering her the daisies, "not just for the video or the scandal, but for letting fear drive my decisions, for not standing up sooner." Claire cradled the flowers, touching a soft white petal. "Fear's a powerful thing," she said quietly. "You taught me something about courage." Michael continued. "Not just that first day on the road, but every day since. The way you keep showing up, keep caring, keep helping, even when it costs you." He took a deep breath. "I'd like to try again. Not as a CEO or an investor, just as me, if you're willing." Claire looked up at him, seeing past the wealth and status to the man who'd spent weeks learning her grandmother's recipes, who listened to seniors' stories, who finally chose truth over appearance. Her heart trembled with the weight of the moment. "Yes," she whispered. "I'd like that." When they emerged from the office, the seniors burst into gentle applause, making Claire laugh even as she wiped away a tear. Mrs. Henderson winked at her over her crossword puzzle, and Mr. Lewis raised his coffee cup in a silent toast. The morning sunlight streamed through the bakery windows, warming the scene as Claire set her daisies in a mason jar on the counter, right where everyone could see them. Over the next few days, Claire and Michael sat together at her kitchen table, surrounded by papers and laptops, carefully planning the next phase of their community initiative. Their focus shifted to creating programs that would truly serve the neighborhood's needs. Cooking classes for young mothers, meal delivery services for homebound seniors, and mentorship opportunities for aspiring local chefs. The bakery's grand reopening on Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. Fresh paint gleamed on the new sign reading "Claire's Kitchen and Community," while inside, the display cases sparkled with fresh pastries and homemade treats. The scent of cinnamon and fresh coffee filled the air. Michael proudly wore the white apron Claire had made him, his name carefully embroidered in blue thread. He stumbled slightly while serving peach cobbler, earning gentle teasing from the seniors who packed the tables. His genuine laughter mixed with theirs, filling the space with joy. Miss Pearl held court at her favorite table, regaling everyone with the story of how it all began. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," she declared, patting Claire's hand as she passed by. As twilight approached, Claire and Michael stepped outside together. String lights twinkled above them, casting a warm glow over the brick facade. The evening breeze carried the sweet scent of magnolia blossoms. "All this from a broken-down car," Claire whispered, watching the lights sway gently. Michael squeezed her hand softly. "All this because you stopped." Their fingers intertwined as they stood there, shoulders touching, looking ahead at their shared future. one built not on wealth or status, but on the simple foundations of compassion, faith, and the beauty of second chances. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.